I learned early that invisibility was safer than defiance. In a palace built from black marble and silver light, where wolves in silk and steel moved like storms contained in human skin, I was nothing more than a shadow slipping between them. A servant, a ghost, something that existed only to refill goblets, to scrub floors that would be dirtied again before the moon rose, to stand still and silent while nobles discussed power as if it were air they were entitled to breathe. They never looked at me. That was the point. My name was Elone Vance, though no one had called me that in years. In the palace, I was simply a girl. Or you, or nothing at all. House Vance had fallen 15 years ago, stripped of title, land, and memory. Officially, we did not exist. Unofficially, we were a warning whispered behind closed doors. Do not fall. Do not weaken. Do not become what they became. My aunt ensured I remembered that. You eat when I say you eat, she would tell me, her voice soft enough that no one else would hear the cruelty threaded through it. You speak when spoken to. You breathe because I allow it. I had learned not to answer. Answering led to consequences. So I survived the way ghosts survive. Quietly, carefully, hungry. The hunger was constant now. A dull, gnawing ache that curled through my stomach and wrapped around my ribs like a fist. It made my vision swim if I stood too quickly. It made the edges of the world blur into something soft and distant. It made everything harder, but it also made everything clearer. Because when you are starving, you learn exactly what matters, and what matters is staying alive. The grand ballroom blazed with light. 500 wolves filled the space, their voices a low, constant hum beneath the music. Chandeliers hung like captured constellations overhead, casting gold and silver across polished marble floors. Silk gowns whispered against stone, boots struck with measured authority. Tonight was the choosing. The night the Alpha King would announce his queen. I kept my head down as I moved along the edge of the room, balancing a tray of crystal glasses that weighed more than it should have. My hands trembled, though whether from exhaustion or something deeper, I could not tell. This was not my world. It never had been. But tonight, it felt like the entire palace was holding its breath, waiting, anticipating, because the man who would choose tonight was not just any alpha. He was Kalen Blackmere, the most powerful wolf in the realm. They said he could silence a room of 500 wolves with a single word. They said he could smell lies before they were spoken. They said he had turned entire battlefields into graveyards without ever raising his voice. I had never seen him up close. Servants like me were not meant to. But I felt him, even across the room. A pressure, a presence, something vast and controlled and dangerous in a way that made every instinct inside me sharpen to a razor's edge. My fingers tightened around the tray. Do not look. Do not draw attention. Do not exist. I moved past a cluster of nobles, their voices low and amused. House Vanthorne has positioned their daughter perfectly. Of course they have. They've been preparing for this since she could walk. She will make a suitable queen. Suitable is not the same as chosen. A quiet laugh followed that. I kept walking. Step, breathe, step. The hunger twisted. My vision flickered. Just keep moving. I reached the far edge of the ballroom, near the towering windows draped in silver damask. Cool air seeped through the glass, brushing against my overheated skin. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. Just for a moment. That was when I felt it. A prickling sensation at the back of my neck, like fingertips trailing across my skin. My entire body went still. Someone was watching me. not glancing, not passing interest, watching. The intensity of it made my breath catch. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me not to, I lifted my head. Across the ballroom, on the raised dais near the Iron Throne, he stood. Kalen Blackmere. Even from this distance, there was no mistaking him. He did not move like other men. He did not shift his weight or glance around or engage in the quiet politics unfolding around him. He stood utterly still, as if the entire world moved around him, not the other way around. Dark hair fell across his forehead, stark against skin that looked carved from shadow and light. His gaze was locked on me, not past me, not through me, on me. The tray slipped in my hands, just slightly, but enough. My heart slammed against my ribs. No, 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 no! I dropped my gaze immediately, panic slicing through the fog of hunger. He cannot be looking at me. There is nothing to see. I am nothing to see. Move. I took a step forward. The world tilted. My vision swam, black creeping in at the edges. Not now. Not here. I forced another step. My foot caught on the hem of my threadbare dress. The tray tipped. Crystals shattered against marble. The sound cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot. 500 voices fell silent, and I was falling. The floor rushed up to meet me, heat. Arms, strength that felt like iron wrapped in silk caught me before I hit the ground. The world snapped back into focus with violent clarity. I was not on the floor. I was in his arms, Kalen Blackmere's arms. The heat radiating from him was overwhelming, like standing too close to a bonfire. It sank into my skin, into my bones, igniting something deep inside me that I did not understand. His scent hit me next. Dark. Sharp. Something wild threaded through with something that felt like winter air just before snowfall. My breath caught. His chest vibrated, a growl, low, barely contained. His hand tightened against my back, pulling me closer. Too close. The world disappeared. The ballroom, the nobles, the music. Everything fell away until there was only this moment, this contact, this impossible, searing awareness. His nostrils flared, his pupils dilated, swallowing the gold of his eyes until only thin rings remained. And then everything stopped. You. The word was quiet, but it carried. It carried through the entire ballroom, through 500 wolves who did not dare to breathe. I tried to pull away. Instinct. Survival. This was wrong. This was dangerous. This was his grip tightened. Not enough to hurt. Enough to stop me. My heart pounded. Let me go, I said, my voice rough, unsteady, but there. Always there. Even when I should have stayed silent. His gaze did not shift. Did not soften. Did not waver. You are mine. The words landed like a blade. Sharp. Absolute. Impossible. A ripple of shock moved through the room. I froze. No, I said immediately. Because that was the only answer I had. The only answer I could give. No. Something in his expression changed. Not anger. Not irritation. Something deeper. More dangerous. Let her go. The voice cut through the moment like broken glass. My aunt. I did not need to turn to know. I felt her before I saw her. Felt the cold, controlled fury radiating from her as she approached. She is my ward, Your Majesty. Lady Hela said smoothly. I assure you, this display is entirely her own doing. His arms did not loosen, did not shift. She will be returned to me immediately. Silence. Thick, heavy, deadly. Kalen Blackmere did not look at her. He did not acknowledge her. He did not do anything except look at me, as if I were the only thing in the room worth seeing. Mine, he said again. Quieter this time, more dangerous. My heart stuttered. I should have been afraid. I was afraid. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Something that felt like recognition. Like something inside me had been waiting for this moment without my knowledge, without my permission. No, I said again, weaker this time, because my body was betraying me, leaning into him, seeking the heat, the steadiness, the strength. His thumb brushed against my wrist, and something cracked open inside me, like ice breaking in spring. I gasped. The world tilted again, and this time, everything went dark. I woke to silk, not the rough, threadbare scratch of servant linens that smelled faintly of lye and damp stone, not the thin pallet I had learned to curl around, conserving warmth and space like something small and forgettable. Silk. Soft enough that my fingers sank into it without resistance. Layers of it beneath me, around me, covering me like something precious instead of something expendable. For a moment, I did not move, because this was not real. It could not be. The air itself felt different, warmer, cleaner, carrying a faint scent of moonflowers and something deeper beneath it, something that stirred that same strange awareness low in my chest. I opened my eyes slowly. A high ceiling arched above me, carved stone traced with silver filigree that caught the light spilling in from tall windows draped in pale fabric. The room was vast, easily larger than the entire servant wing I had slept in for years. I did not belong here. The thought came sharp and immediate, cutting through the haze in my mind. I pushed myself upright. The world tilted, not as violently as before, but enough to make my fingers grip the silk beneath me until the room steadied. Hunger, still there, always there, but muted, distant, as if something else had taken priority. I became aware of it then, that thread, that impossible, invisible thing that seemed to hum beneath my skin. It pulsed, softly, steadily, like something alive. My breath caught. No, I did not understand what that was, but I knew it should not be there. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cold beneath my feet, grounding in a way the silk was not. Real, solid, something I could trust. Good. I needed something real. The door opened. I turned sharply, instinct overriding the lingering weakness in my body. She entered quietly, closing the door behind her with careful precision. Silver hair coiled neatly at the crown of her head. Deep blue robes that marked her instantly. A healer, not a palace servant, not nobility either. Something in between. Her gaze found mine, and something like surprise flickered there before settling into something gentler. You are awake. Her voice was calm, measured, the kind of voice that had seen too much to be easily unsettled. Where am I? My voice came out rougher than I intended. She did not hesitate. The king's tower. My stomach dropped. Of course it was. Of course this would not be simple. Of course this would not be something I could quietly slip away from. I pushed myself to stand. My knees trembled, but they held. I need to leave. The healer's expression did not change. That is not a decision you need to make immediately. It is not a decision, I said, sharper now. It is a necessity. Because staying here was not survival. Staying here was exposure, danger, something far worse than hunger. Her gaze sharpened slightly, studying me in a way that made me want to step back. You collapsed in the middle of the grand ballroom, she said. You have not eaten properly in days, possibly longer. Your body is in no condition to make decisions that involve walking out of a guarded palace. I have done worse, I said. Truth, always truth when it slipped past the defenses I had built. Something flickered in her eyes again. Understanding. That was worse than judgment. You will eat first, she said. It was not a command, but it was not a suggestion either. My stomach twisted in response. Hunger surged, sharp and immediate, betraying me. I hated that. I hated that my body could be so easily manipulated. I don't need, you do. 2 words. Firm. Unyielding. I stopped. Because something in her tone was not dismissive. Not condescending. It was certain. As if she had seen this before. As if she knew exactly what I was and what I needed, even if I did not. I will not force you, she added after a moment. But if you attempt to leave in your current state, you will not make it past the first corridor. That was also true. I knew it. My body knew it. I exhaled slowly. Fine. The word felt like defeat. She inclined her head slightly, as if acknowledging a negotiation rather than a surrender. She moved toward a small table near the window, where a tray had been placed. Food. Real food. Bread still warm. Fruit. Something that smelled rich and savory. My stomach clenched painfully. Slowly, she said, watching me carefully as I approached. If you eat too quickly, you will make yourself ill. I ignored her. Not entirely, but enough. I reached for the bread first. My hands trembled. I hated that too. I tore off a piece and brought it to my mouth. The first bite was almost painful. My body reacted before my mind could. Relief, sharp and overwhelming. I forced myself to slow down. Not because she told me to, because I knew she was right. Because I had learned the hard way what happened when you let hunger control you. I ate in silence. She watched. Not in the way nobles watched servants. Not with disinterest or superiority. With attention. With care. It was unsettling. When I finished enough to take the edge off the hunger, I stepped back. I need to leave, I repeated. Her gaze held mine for a long moment. You should speak with him first. No. The answer came immediately, automatic, instinctive. Because whatever had happened in that ballroom, whatever that moment had been, it was not something I could afford to explore. Her lips pressed together slightly. You may not have a choice in that. I always have a choice. Even when it looked like I didn't. Even when the options were terrible. Choice was the only thing that had kept me alive this long. The door opened again. Neither of us had heard him approach. That alone told me everything I needed to know about the kind of predator he was. Silent, controlled, unavoidable. The air shifted. That pressure returned. Stronger now, closer. I did not turn immediately, because I already knew. I felt him. That thread inside me pulled tight, humming with sudden intensity. My pulse spiked. You should sit. His voice, low, rough. It settled into my bones like something inevitable. I turned slowly. Kalen Blackmere stood in the doorway. He wore no crown. He did not need one. Power radiated from him in a way that made titles unnecessary. Dark clothing. Simple. Controlled. Every line of him deliberate. His gaze found mine instantly. Locked. Unmoving. You are awake, he said. It was not a question. I am leaving. I held his gaze as I said it. Refusal. Defiance. All the things that had kept me from breaking completely under my aunt's control. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not surprise. Recognition. As if he had expected nothing less. You may, he said. The words landed softly. Too softly. I frowned. That is not what I expected you to say. No, he agreed. Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Charged. You may leave, he repeated. No one will stop you. My chest tightened. That should have been it. That should have been freedom. Simple. Clean. Offered without condition. So why did it feel like a trap? Then move, I said, nodding toward the doorway. He did not move. Instead, he stepped further into the room, closing the distance. Not enough to touch. Enough to make the air between us feel thinner. If that is what you truly want, he said, his voice dropping slightly, carrying that same dangerous weight it had in the ballroom, you will walk out of this chamber, out of this tower, and return to your aunt. The words hit harder than they should have, because he understood. He understood exactly what he was offering, and exactly what it would cost. My jaw tightened. That is not your concern. No, he said again. It is not. Another step closer. The thread inside me pulled tighter. My breath caught. But it is your reality. I hated that. I hated that he could see through it. Through me. Through the carefully constructed survival I had built over years. You don't know anything about my reality. His gaze did not shift. I know enough. The words were quiet, certain, infuriating. I lifted my chin slightly. Then you know I am leaving. Then leave. 2 words. Simple. Absolute. He stepped aside, clearing the doorway. Freedom. There. Open. Waiting. I stared at it. At the space beyond him. At the path that would take me back to everything I knew. Everything I had survived. Everything that had nearly destroyed me. My feet did not move, because this was not simple. This was not freedom. This was a choice between 2 different kinds of cages. Behind me, the room pulsed with warmth. Safety I did not trust. In front of me, the corridor stretched cold and familiar. Pain I understood. My heart pounded. Why? I asked finally. The word slipped out before I could stop it. His gaze sharpened. Why what? Why me? Because nothing about this made sense. Because I was nothing. Because I had spent years making sure I stayed nothing. Something in his expression changed again. Softer, more dangerous. Come here, he said. I did not move. I am not your servant. No, he said quietly. You are not. The thread between us pulled, hard. My body betrayed me. 1 step forward, then another, until I stood in front of him again. Too close, always too close. His hand lifted slowly, gave me time to pull away, to refuse. I did not. His fingers brushed against my wrist. Heat, immediate, overwhelming. The thread snapped tight. My breath hitched. You felt it, he said. Not a question, a fact. I swallowed. Yes. The word was barely there. His thumb pressed lightly against the inside of my wrist, right where my pulse hammered. Say it again. My heart stuttered. What? My name? The demand was quiet, but it carried that same crushing weight. I stared at him. This was ridiculous. This was dangerous. This was Kalen. The moment the name left my lips, something shifted. The thread. The air. Him. A tremor ran through his body. Subtle. Controlled. But there. His eyes darkened again. I should not. I knew that. Every instinct screamed it. But something deeper, something older overrode it. Kalen. His hand tightened around my wrist. Not enough to hurt, enough to anchor. Mine, he said again. And this time, my body did not fight it as hard. They dressed me like I belonged there. That was the first mistake. Silk, the color of stormlight, replaced the threadbare gray I had worn for years. The fabric clung differently than anything I had ever touched, as if it understood the shape of me and refused to let me hide inside it. My hair, usually tied back in a way that kept it out of my face and out of notice, fell loose down my back in soft waves I did not recognize as my own. I stared at my reflection for a long moment. A stranger stared back. Someone too visible. Someone too exposed. You look like a queen already. I turned sharply at the voice. Pippa stood in the doorway, breathless, her round face flushed with something dangerously close to excitement. She shut the door quickly behind her, as if afraid she would be seen where she did not belong. Pippa, what are you doing here? I heard, she said, rushing forward. Everyone heard. The entire palace is talking about it. Of course they were. 500 wolves had witnessed it. There was no hiding from that. Her eyes moved over me, wide with disbelief and something else. Relief. "You're alive," she said quietly. "I thought when you fell, I thought I'm fine." The lie came easily. It always did. But she knew me too well. "You're not," she said, softer now. "You're just better than most at pretending." I looked away. Because she was right. Because she always had been. "What are you doing here?" I asked again, sharper this time. "If anyone sees you?" "They won't," she said quickly. "I came through the servant corridors. No one pays attention there. You taught me that." A flicker of something like guilt moved through me. I had taught her how to be invisible, how to survive. I did not know if that was a kindness or cruelty. "You need to leave," I said. "In a minute," she insisted. "First you need to listen to me." Something in her tone made me still. Urgent, serious, not the nervous chatter she usually used to fill silence. "What is it?" She hesitated, just for a second. "Then she's been looking for you." My chest tightened. Of course she has. Lady Hela would not let something like this go. Not quietly, not without control. "Not just looking," Pippa said. "Planning." Cold slid down my spine. "What does that mean?" "It means she knows something is wrong," Pippa said, her voice dropping. "She's been asking questions. About you, about the king, about what happened in that ballroom." My fingers curled slightly at my sides. "She always knows when something is wrong." "That's not the worst of it," Pippa said. I went still. "Then say it." Pippa swallowed. I heard her speaking to one of the council members. "Lord Thorne." Of course she would go to someone like him. She told him you're dangerous." A humorless sound escaped me. "She's been telling people that for years." "No," Pippa said, shaking her head. "Not like this. Not as a warning. As an accusation." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Pippa stepped closer, lowering her voice further. "She said you're not just a servant, that you're something else. Something that shouldn't exist." The thread inside me pulsed. Hard. Painfully. I pressed a hand to my side instinctively. "That's not new," I said, though the words felt weaker than I intended. But Pippa shook her head again. "She's going to say it in front of the council." My breath caught. Publicly. Of course she would. If she could not control me in private, she would destroy me in public. "She won't stop there," Pippa added. "She's going to demand they take you away from him." A sharp, immediate reaction flared inside me at that. Possessive. Protective. Not mine. I stiffened. "I am not his to take." "I know that," Pippa said quickly. "But they don't care about what you are. They care about what you represent." "And what is that?" I asked, already knowing I would not like the answer. "A threat." The word settled heavily between us. Because that was the truth of it. I had always been a threat. Not because of what I had done. Because of what I might be. "What are you going to do?" Pippa asked. I did not answer immediately. Because the answer was not simple. Because the answer might already be out of my hands. "I'm leaving," I said finally. The words felt less certain than they had before. Pippa stared at me. "Are you?" I met her gaze. "Yes." "Then why are you still here?" The question hit harder than it should have. Because I did not have a clean answer. Because something inside me was resisting that choice in a way I did not understand. "I will leave after the council meeting," I said instead. Pippa's brows drew together. "That's dangerous." "I know." "Then don't go to the council." "I don't think that's an option." Because if Lady Hela was going to speak, If she was going to drag whatever truth she thought she had into the light, then I needed to be there, to hear it, to face it, to decide what to do next. Pippa reached for my hand. Her grip was warm, familiar, real. "Be careful," she said quietly. "I always am." She gave me a look that said she did not entirely believe that. Then she stepped back. "I should go before someone notices I'm gone." "Yes." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Alone?" I looked at her. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice soft. "I've never seen you look like this." "Like what?" "Like someone who doesn't want to run." She slipped out before I could answer. I stood there for a long moment after she was gone. Because that was not true. I did want to run. I always wanted to run. So why did it feel like something inside me was anchoring me in place? The council chamber was colder than the ballroom. Not in temperature, in feeling. Black marble walls veined with silver rose, high above a circular table, where 7 seats had been placed in a crescent. Each one occupied, each one watching, waiting. I stood at the center of the room, alone. Exactly where they wanted me. Exactly where I had never wanted to be. "State your name." The voice came from the high elder, seated at the center. Ceremonial, detached. As if this were a formality rather than something that could decide my fate. "Elone," I said. A ripple moved through the council. Recognition. Or perhaps just interest. "Elone of what house?" Another voice asked. Sharpened. Testing. I held their gaze. "I have no house." That was the safest answer. The only answer I had used for years. But it was not the truth. And they knew it. Incorrect. The word came from Lady Hela. She stood at the edge of the chamber, composed as always. Perfect. Controlled. Her pale face unreadable to anyone who did not know where to look. I knew where to look. At the corners of her mouth, at the slight tension in her jaw, at the way her eyes gleamed just a little too brightly. She was enjoying this. "Her name," Lady Hela said smoothly, "is Elone Vance." Silence, then shock. It moved through the chamber like a wave. "House Vance was dissolved," one of the council members said sharply. 15 years ago." "Yes," Lady Hela agreed softly, "and yet here she stands." All eyes turned to me, weighing, measuring, deciding. "Explain," the high elder said. I did not, because there was nothing I could say that would not make this worse. Lady Hela smiled, sharp, controlled. "She is my niece," she continued, "the last surviving member of a house that should have remained buried." My hands curled at my sides. "She was a child," another council member said, "hardly responsible for the fall of her house." Lady Hela's smile did not falter. "No," she agreed, "not responsible." Her gaze slid to me, cold, precise, but dangerous nonetheless. The thread inside me pulsed violently. Pain flared along my side. I inhaled sharply. "On what grounds?" the high elder asked. Lady Hela stepped forward, into the center of the chamber. Closer to me, close enough that I could see the truth beneath her composure. Something ugly, something ancient. "She is not what she appears to be," Lady Hela said. My heart pounded. "Then what is she?" someone demanded. Lady Hela's gaze locked on mine, and for the first time in years I felt something like fear. Not of her, of what she might say, of what she might reveal. Something that should not exist, Lady Hela said softly. The room held its breath. "And if that is true?" the high elder pressed. Lady Hela's smile widened, then sharpened. "Then she is a threat to the entire realm." A murmur rippled through the council. Concern, suspicion, calculation. "And you have proof?" one of them asked. Lady Hela's gaze did not leave mine. "Yes." The word landed like a blade. "Then present it," the high elder said. Lady Hella tilted her head slightly, as if savoring the moment, as if this were something she had been waiting years to do. Gladly. The doors to the chamber opened, and everything changed. The doors opened with a sound that echoed like a verdict. Every head in the chamber turned, every gaze shifted, and for one sharp, disorienting moment, I thought she had brought soldiers, guards, chains, something visible, something I could fight. Instead, a body was carried in, still, too still, laid carefully onto the cold marble floor at the center of the chamber. My breath caught, because I knew him. Not well, not personally, but I knew his face. Everyone did. A scout from the Western Territories, one of the wolves who patrolled the edges of the realm where things grew darker and less understood. His name flickered through my mind, just out of reach. It did not matter. What mattered was he was wrong. Everything about him was wrong. "Explain," the High Elder said, his voice tight now. Not ceremonial, not detached, alert. Lady Hella stepped closer to the body, her movements unhurried, controlled, as if she stood at the center of a performance she had rehearsed too many times to fail. "This wolf," she said softly, "was found at the edge of Thornwood." A murmur moved through the council. Thornwood, dangerous land, wild, unpredictable. "But that is not unusual," one of them said. "Scouts go missing. They are found. Sometimes alive, sometimes not." Lady Hella inclined her head slightly. "Yes, sometimes not." She knelt beside the body and placed her hand on his chest. "Tell me," she continued, her voice dropping. "What do you see?" Silence. Then, "Nothing," someone said. "A dead wolf." "Look closer," she replied. Reluctantly, the High Elder rose from his seat. He approached. Others followed. One by one, they circled the body, their expressions shifting from impatience to something more uncertain. I did not move. I did not need to. I could feel it from where I stood. That wrongness, that absence, like a hollow space where something vital should have been. "What is this?" one of them asked finally, his voice tight. Lady Hella stood, slowly, deliberately. "This," she said, "is what happens when something takes the soul from a wolf and leaves the body behind." The words landed like a blow. A ripple of disbelief moved through the chamber. "That is impossible," another council member said immediately. "Is it?" Lady Hella asked softly. Her gaze slid to me. "And what if I told you that this is not the first?" Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. "Speak plainly," the High Elder said. Lady Hella's smile sharpened. "I have been tracking these creatures for years. Wolves who are no longer wolves. Bodies that move, hunt, kill, but feel nothing, think nothing. Hollow." The word settled into the air like something poisonous. Hollow. "And what does this have to do with the girl?" Lord Thorne demanded, his lip curling slightly as he looked at me. Lady Hella turned fully toward me now. "This," she said, "has everything to do with her." My pulse spiked. No, this was wrong. This was not she draws them," Lady Hella continued. My stomach dropped. "Where she goes, they follow, like moths to a flame they do not understand." "That is speculation," someone argued. "It is observation," Lady Hella corrected. Her eyes gleamed. "I have watched her for years. Every place she has been, something unnatural has occurred. Illness that does not behave as it should. Animals that react as if sensing something they cannot see. And now this." She gestured to the body. "This is not coincidence." The council murmured again, more uncertain this time, more divided. "And you believe she is responsible?" the High Elder asked. "I believe," Lady Hella said carefully, "that she is connected." My hands curled into fists. "This is absurd." The words came from me before I could stop them. Every eye turned to me. Good. Let them look. Let them see. I have done nothing, I said, my voice steady despite the way my heart hammered against my ribs. I have lived in your palace as a servant. I have followed every rule, every command. If something is happening beyond your borders, it has nothing to do with me. Lady Hela tilted her head slightly. Is that what you believe? Yes. Even now? She pressed. Even after what happened in the ballroom? A flicker of something moved through the council. Interest, suspicion. What happened in the ballroom? The High Elder asked. Lady Hela's smile deepened. The king, she said softly, declared her his mate. The chamber erupted, voices overlapping, shock, outrage, disbelief. That is impossible. The king has not formally chosen. This is madness, silence. One word, and the room fell quiet. Not because of the High Elder, because of him. I had not heard him enter. Again. But suddenly, he was there, at the edge of the chamber, watching. Kalen Blackmere. The air shifted around him, power coiling beneath the surface like something barely restrained. His gaze found mine immediately. That thread, it snapped tight. My breath hitched. You will speak one at a time, he said. His voice was low, controlled, but it carried through the chamber with absolute authority. No one argued. No one moved. The High Elder inclined his head slightly. As you command, Your Majesty. Kalen stepped forward, each movement deliberate, measured, like a predator that knew exactly how dangerous it was. He did not look at the council. He did not acknowledge Lady Hela. He came to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. Close enough that the thread between us pulsed with a steady, undeniable rhythm. She is not to be discussed as if she is not present, he said. The words were quiet, but they carried weight, finality, a warning. Lord Thorne's lip curled again, though more carefully this time. Then perhaps she would like to explain herself. Kalen did not look at him. Perhaps she will, he said. His gaze remained on me. Waiting, not demanding. Waiting. The choice settled heavily in my chest, because he was giving it to me. Again, that impossible, infuriating thing. Choice. I swallowed. I have nothing to explain, I said finally. I do not know what those things are. I have never seen one. I have never pain. Sharp. Sudden. It tore through my side, stealing the breath from my lungs. I gasped. My hand flew to my hip instinctively. Heat flared beneath my skin. Burning. Wrong. The thread between us surged. Kalen's body went still beside me. What is it? He demanded. I shook my head. I don't know. Another pulse of pain. Stronger. Brighter. Like something beneath my skin was trying to break free. A murmur rippled through the council. Look, someone whispered. I followed their gaze and froze. Light, faint, silver. It flickered beneath the fabric of my dress, right where my hand pressed against my side. My breath hitched. No, that was not possible. That was not. Lady Hela's smile widened. There it was, the moment she had been waiting for. You see? She said softly. The chamber held its breath. Something that should not exist. The light flared brighter. Pain lanced through me again. I staggered. Kalen's hand closed around my arm, steadying me instantly. Heat, strength, anchor. The thread between us surged, responding to him, to the contact, to something deeper than either of us understood. The light pulsed in time with it. The council stared, some with fear, some with fascination, some with something far more dangerous. Greed. What is she? The High Elder asked. For the first time, uncertainty edged his voice. Lady Hela's gaze remained fixed on me. Something ancient, she said. Something powerful. Her smile sharpened. And something that will destroy us all if we do not act. Kalen's grip tightened slightly. Not possessive, protective. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. No, one word. Absolute. Lady Hella's eyes flicked to him. You cannot protect what you do not understand, Your Majesty. I understand enough, he said. Finally, his gaze shifted. To her, cold, deadly. She is under my protection. The words landed like a challenge, a declaration, a line drawn. Lady Hella held his gaze for a long moment. Then she smiled. Slow, satisfied, as you wish. The ease of her agreement was wrong. Too easy, too smooth. It sent a chill down my spine, because Lady Hella never gave up control without gaining something in return. Never. The light beneath my skin flickered, then dimmed. The pain receded just enough for me to breathe again. But the damage was done. The truth, or something like it, was no longer hidden. And every predator in that room had just learned there was something inside me worth hunting. The palace felt different after that. Not in the way stone and silver could change overnight, but in the way silence shifted. In the way eyes lingered a second too long. In the way conversation stopped when I entered a room, only to resume in hushed tones once I passed. They knew, or at least, they knew enough to be afraid. I walked the servant corridors out of habit, even though no one had ordered me back to them, even though silk still brushed my skin instead of rough cloth, even though the king himself had declared I could leave. Choice. The word echoed in my mind like something I could not quite hold on to. I should have left. After the council, I should have walked out of the palace and never looked back. Instead, I stayed, because leaving now felt like stepping blindly into something worse, because Lady Hella had shown her hand, but not her endgame, because something inside me had awakened, and I did not understand it enough to face it alone. And because the thread, it was stronger now. No longer a faint hum beneath my skin, but something steady, constant, like a second pulse that did not belong entirely to me. I could feel him. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. A flicker of focus when he was in council. A quiet, restrained tension when he was dealing with matters of state. Something deeper, darker when his thoughts brushed too close to whatever had happened in that chamber. And sometimes, something softer. That was the most unsettling part, because it did not match the man I had seen, the king who could silence a room with a word, the predator who moved like the world itself belonged to him. That softness felt real, and I did not trust it. I turned a corner too quickly and nearly collided with someone. Strong hands caught my arms before I could stumble. Reflex, immediate, familiar. My breath caught. Kalen. The name left my lips before I could stop it. The moment it did, the thread snapped tight. A surge of heat raced through me, stealing the air from my lungs. His grip tightened slightly. Not enough to hurt. Enough to anchor. Careful. His voice was low. Closer than I expected. Too close. I looked up. Too close. He was always too close. I'm not the one who appeared out of nowhere, I said, trying to pull back. He did not let go. I did not appear, he said. You were not paying attention. I frowned. You were thinking, he cut in. Not accusing, not dismissive, certain. I stilled, because he was right. Again. I am allowed to think, I said. His gaze held mine, about leaving, not a question. My chest tightened. Yes. The lie felt weaker now, because he could feel it. I knew he could, not the words. The truth beneath them. His thumb shifted slightly against my arm. A small movement, but it sent another wave of heat through me. "You have not left," he said. "No." Silence stretched between us, not empty, charged, heavy with everything neither of us was saying. "You should have," he added. That caught me off guard. I blinked. "You're telling me to leave?" "If you want to live," he said simply. The words landed harder than anything else he had said. My pulse spiked. "You think staying here is more dangerous than going back to her?" "Yes." No hesitation. No doubt. My jaw tightened. "You don't know her. I know enough." Something flickered in his eyes then. Something darker, colder. She revealed too much too easily. I stilled. "You notice that?" "I notice everything that concerns you." The words settled heavily between us. Not possessive, not quite, but close enough that my heart skipped. "That's not your responsibility," I said. His gaze did not shift. "It is now." The thread pulsed. Hard. I swallowed. "You don't even know what I am." His expression did not change. "Neither do you. That was true, and I hated it." "I am not a weapon," I said quietly. "I did not say you were." "That's what they think," I pressed. "That's what she wants them to think." "And you?" he asked. The question was simple, but it cut deeper than anything else. Because I did not have an answer. Because I had spent my entire life being told I was something wrong, something dangerous, something that needed to be controlled. And now, for the first time, there was proof. "I don't know," I admitted. The words felt like a fracture, like something inside me giving way. His grip loosened slightly, not releasing, adjusting, as if he understood that moment for what it was. "Then we find out. The word hit harder than it should have. "I didn't ask for your help. You did not have to." I let out a quiet, humorless breath. "That's not how this works. It is now." Of course it was, because nothing about this was normal. Nothing about this followed the rules I had built my survival around. "Why?" I asked again. The same question. The same need for something that made sense. "Why me?" His gaze sharpened, not with irritation, with something deeper, more controlled, more dangerous. "Come here." The command was quiet. I did not move. "I am already here. Closer." The word was softer this time. Not a command, not quite, something else. I hesitated, because every instinct I had told me this was a mistake, because every step toward him felt like stepping further away from the life I understood. But the thread pulled. I stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him without him touching me, close enough that my breath caught. His hand lifted again, slow, deliberate, giving me time to refuse, time to pull away. I did not. His fingers brushed against my wrist, the same place, the same point of contact. This time, the reaction was immediate, stronger. The thread surged, heat flooded my veins. My breath hitched sharply. His eyes darkened. "Do you feel that?" he asked. The question was unnecessary. "Yes." The word came out breathless, unsteady, real. His thumb pressed lightly against my pulse, and something shifted. Not just between us, inside me. The world tilted. The corridor faded. And suddenly, I was not entirely in my own body anymore. I felt focus, sharp, controlled, a map of movement and intention that was not mine. Voices, muted, distant, council members speaking in low tones, strategizing, arguing. I blinked. The vision snapped back. I gasped. "What, you felt it?" he said. Not a question, a confirmation. "That wasn't me," I said quickly. "It was." "No," I shook my head. "That was you." "Yes." The words settled with quiet certainty. My heart pounded. "That's not possible. It is." The thread pulsed again. Softer this time, but steady, alive. "You can feel me," he said, "and you can feel me." My stomach dropped. No, no, that was not, I don't want that, I said immediately. The reaction was instinctive, protective, because that meant vulnerability, exposure, something I had never allowed. His gaze did not soften. I know. That caught me off guard. You do? Yes. Silence stretched again. Different this time. Less sharp, more aware. What happens if I leave? I asked quietly. His grip tightened slightly. If you go far enough, he said, it will hurt. The honesty of it hit harder than any attempt to soften it would have. For both of us? Yes. The word was steady, unavoidable. I exhaled slowly. So there's no clean way out of this? No, of course not. Why would there be? Then what? I asked. What do you expect me to do? His gaze held mine, unwavering. Stay. The word landed between us, heavy, simple, terrifying. And do what? I pressed. Figure out what you are, he said, before someone else decides for you. Lady Hella's face flashed through my mind, her smile, her certainty, her control. My jaw tightened. I won't let her. I know. He cut in, not dismissing, not doubting, acknowledging. But she will try. The thread pulsed again. This time something darker moved through it, a flicker of his emotion. Cold, controlled, anger, not directed at me, at her. It hit me like a physical force, sharp, intense, gone just as quickly. I inhaled sharply. You felt that? Yes. Good. The word was quiet, satisfied. You should know what you are dealing with. I swallowed, because that anger, that was not something anyone should want directed at them, and Lady Hella had just made herself the target of it. Then we're both in danger, I said. His gaze did not waver. Yes. Silence settled between us again. But this time, it was not empty. It was a decision waiting to be made. I looked at him, at the man who had turned my world upside down in a single moment, at the king who had given me a choice and somehow made it more complicated instead of less, at the bond I did not understand but could no longer ignore. I'm not staying because you told me to, I said finally. I know. I'm staying because I need answers. I know. I'm not yours. The words were quieter now, less certain. His eyes held mine. Dark, steady. Not yet. The thread surged, and this time I did not fight it as hard. Night fell heavy over the palace, the kind of darkness that pressed close, thick with silence and something waiting beneath it. I should have been asleep. Instead, I stood at the window in the king's tower, staring out at the forest that stretched beyond the palace walls. The great forest did not sleep. It breathed. It watched. It held things that did not belong to the world inside these walls. The thread stirred, not soft this time, not steady, sharp, urgent. My breath caught. Kaelin? No answer. But I felt him. Distance, movement, focus snapping into something violent and precise. Danger. It slammed into me without warning. Fear. Not mine. His. My heart raced. The thread pulled hard. Toward the forest. I didn't think. I moved, bare feet against cold stone, down corridors I should not have known, through passages that opened as if the palace itself was guiding me. The doors gave way to the night. Cold air hit my skin. The pull intensified. Into the trees. Branches clawed at my dress as I ran. Roots twisted beneath my feet, but I didn't slow. The thread burned now, a line of fire dragging me forward. Then stillness. A clearing. Moonlight cut through the darkness, silver against black. And in the center, him. Half-shifted. Monstrous. Magnificent. Wrong in a way that made my chest tighten. His body trembled, muscles locked between man and wolf. His eyes gold, wild, unseeing. Something circled him. Not a wolf. Not anything that should exist. It flickered between forms: shadow, bone, emptiness, hollow. My breath stuttered. It lunged. I moved. No thought, no plan, just instinct. I stepped between them. Light exploded from my hands, silver, blinding. It tore through the creature as it struck. A sound ripped from it, relief and agony tangled together. Then nothing. Gone. Silence crashed back into the clearing. My chest heaved. The light flickered, faded. I turned. Kalen was staring at me now, fully aware, fully present. Something in his expression shifted. Not shock. Recognition. "You came!" The words were rough, barely human. "I didn't think," I said, breathless. His gaze dropped to my hands, still faintly glowing, then back to my face. "You felt me." "Yes." The thread pulsed, stronger than ever. He took one step toward me, slow, careful, as if I might disappear. Elone. My name sounded different in his voice now, like something claimed, like something found. And for the first time, I didn't pull away. The silence after the creature vanished felt wrong. Not peaceful, not safe. Too empty. As if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Kalen did not move immediately. Neither did I. The thread between us pulsed hard, still reacting to what had just happened. To the light. To the danger. To him. "You should not have come," he said finally. The words were rough, dragged from somewhere deeper than speech. "I didn't have a choice," I replied. His gaze sharpened. "You always have a choice." "Not with this," I said, pressing a hand lightly to my side where the heat still lingered beneath my skin. "It pulled me here. That is what concerns me." The honesty in his tone landed heavy. Not anger, not accusation. Concern. For me. I did not know what to do with that. He took another step closer. The half shift was still there, clinging to him like something reluctant to release its hold. His shoulders were too broad, his movements too precise, too predatory. His eyes still burned brighter than they should. "You stepped between me and it," he said, a statement. "Yes, you did not hesitate." "No." "Why?" The question cut sharper than any accusation could have, because I did not have a simple answer, because the truth was not something I fully understood. "Because it was going to kill you?" I said. His expression did not change. "You have seen me fight." "Yes." "And you thought I needed saving?" "I thought it was wrong," I said more firmly now. "That thing wasn't just attacking. It was empty. Like it didn't exist properly. Hollow," he said. The words settled between us again. "Yes." Silence stretched. "Then you destroyed it, not disbelief, observation." "I didn't destroy it," I said slowly. It felt like I released it. His gaze flickered. Interest, recognition, something else beneath that. "Say that again." I frowned. "I don't know how to explain it. Try." I exhaled slowly. When the light hit it, it wasn't like breaking something, I said. It was like something inside it was finally allowed to stop. The thread pulsed, soft this time. His attention sharpened further. "Relief," he said quietly. "Yes." The word came out almost as a whisper, because that was exactly what it had felt like. Relief from something terrible, something endless. Kalen went still, completely still, as if every instinct inside him had locked into place. "There are more," he said. Not a guess, a certainty. "I know," I said, because I could feel that too. Not clearly, not like I felt him, but enough to know that what we had just faced was not alone. "And they will come for you," he added. The words were calm, controlled, deadly. I met his gaze. "I think they already have." The thread tightened again. His jaw flexed. You are not leaving the palace again alone. That wasn't exactly planned. It will not happen again. There was no room for argument in that tone, but I stepped closer anyway, closing the distance he had been carefully maintaining. You can't control this, I said quietly. Not yet. His eyes dropped briefly to the space between us, then back to my face. No, he agreed. The admission should have unsettled me. Instead, it steadied something inside me. Then we figure it out, I said. His gaze held mine, long, unwavering. You say that as if it is simple. I didn't say it was simple, I replied. I said it was necessary. A flicker of something shifted in his expression. Approval, sharp, unexpected. The thread pulsed again. Not urgent, not painful, steady, connected. He reached for me, slowly, as if giving me time to step back, to refuse. I didn't. His hand closed around mine, warm, solid, real. And this time, the heat that followed didn't burn. It settled. Morning came too quickly. Light spilled across the chamber in soft gold, but it did nothing to ease the weight sitting in my chest. I hadn't slept. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The hollow creature. The way it dissolved under my hands. The relief that followed, and beneath that, the thread. Constant now, alive, aware. A quiet knock broke the silence. The door opened before I could answer. The royal healer stepped inside, her gaze moving immediately to me, then to the faint glow that still lingered beneath my skin. You used it? She said. Not a question. I nodded. Her expression shifted. Not fear, not surprise. Recognition. Come here, she said. I hesitated, then moved, because I needed answers more than I needed distance. Her fingers closed gently around my wrist, pressing lightly where the pulse of that second rhythm lived. Her breath caught. Impossible, she whispered. My stomach dropped. What? Her gaze lifted to mine, something like awe flickering there. You're not just connected to the bond, she said slowly. You're amplifying it. The words didn't make sense. What does that mean? It means, she said, her voice tightening slightly. Whatever you are, it's not something this realm has seen in 1,000 years. Cold slid down my spine. That's not helpful. It's the truth. I pulled my hand back, then say it clearly. She held my gaze, and for the first time there was no hesitation. You're the thing they've been trying to erase. Silence fell hard. My chest tightened. Then they're going to try again, I said. Her expression didn't change. Yes. The thread pulsed, sharp, warning, and this time I knew it wasn't just fear. It was coming. The grand ballroom filled again before nightfall, not for celebration, for judgment. 500 wolves gathered beneath chandeliers that burned too bright, their light catching on polished marble and turning the entire room into something sharp and unforgiving. Word had spread faster than anything could be contained. They knew what I had done, or at least they knew enough. I stood at the edge of the room this time, not invisible, not hidden, seen, watched, measured. The thread pulsed steadily beneath my skin. He was already there, at the center, on the dais. Kalen Blackmere stood before the Iron Throne, unmoving, his presence alone enough to quiet the restless murmurs rippling through the court. Beside him, a woman, tall, composed, beautiful in a way that was precise rather than soft. Her hair fell like pale silver down her back, her posture perfect, her gaze calm as it swept the room. House Vanthorne, of course, a political answer to a personal problem. My jaw tightened. So this was how they intended to fix it, force the narrative back into something they could control. The High Elder stepped forward. Tonight, he announced, his voice carrying through the hall. His Majesty will formalize his choice. A ripple of anticipation followed. Hope, calculation, relief, anything but truth. I felt the thread shift, tighten, not calm, not steady, wrong. I lifted my gaze. Kalen had not moved, but something about him had changed, subtle, invisible to most, not to me. Tension coiled beneath his stillness, like something being held back by force rather than choice. Step forward, the High Elder continued. The woman beside Kalen did. Graceful, controlled, certain, everything I was not. My chest tightened. This should not matter. This was expected. This was. The thread snapped. Pain flared sharp and sudden along my side. I inhaled sharply. And then, a growl. Low, deep, barely contained. It did not come from the crowd. It did not come from me. It came from him. The entire ballroom froze. Kalen's head turned, slowly, deliberately. His gaze locked onto mine across the room. Everything else fell away. The noise, the people, the expectation. Gone. There was only that look, that pull, that undeniable connection tightening until it felt like it might tear through both of us. The woman beside him stilled, confusion flickering across her perfect composure. "My king?" she said softly. He did not look at her, did not acknowledge her, did not move. The High Elder cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, no one word. Quiet. Absolute." The woman's expression fractured, just slightly. "You have not even know," he repeated. This time there was no mistaking the finality in it. The room erupted, voices rising, shock, outrage, disbelief. "This is unacceptable." The alliance. "You cannot silence" crashed down again as Kalen moved. Not toward the throne, not toward the council, toward me. The crowd parted instinctively, no one daring to stand in his path. Each step was deliberate, measured, unstoppable. My heart pounded. I didn't move. I couldn't, because the thread had already made the choice. He stopped in front of me. Close. Too close. Always too close. His gaze dropped briefly to my side, where the faint heat pulsed beneath my skin. Then back to my eyes. "You feel it. Not a question." "Yes." The word came out steady. "Certain. Because I did. More than ever." He reached for me. No hesitation. No pause. His hand closed around mine. The contact ignited everything. The thread surged. The room gasped. He turned. Still holding me. Facing the court. Facing the council. Facing the woman he had just refused. "This," he said, his voice carrying through the hall without effort, "is my queen." The words landed like a shockwave. No ceremony, no negotiation, no doubt. Behind us, I felt it, the shift. The moment everything changed, and this time, there was no going back. Silence followed the declaration. Not the kind that comes from uncertainty. The kind that comes when something irreversible has just happened. 500 wolves stood frozen, caught between instinct and disbelief. The council watched from the edges of power they no longer fully controlled. House Vanthorne's chosen queen stood abandoned at the dais, her perfect composure cracking in ways no training could conceal. And at the center of it all, he did not let go of my hand. The thread between us roared now, no longer a quiet pull or a sharp warning. A bond, alive, demanding, real. "This is not lawful," Lord Thorne said, his voice cutting through the silence, brittle with restrained outrage. "There are procedures, alliances, expectations that bind the crown. I am the crown." Kalen did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The words landed with the full weight of truth behind them. Lord Thorne's mouth closed, because there was nothing to argue against. Power did not require permission. It simply existed. But this was more than power. This was choice, and that made it dangerous. I could feel it in the room. Fear shifting into something sharper, something more calculating. They would not accept this easily. They would not accept me. Lady Hella's presence cut through the edges of my awareness before I saw her. Cold, precise, satisfied. She stepped forward from the crowd, her pale face composed, her smile just shy of visible. "You believe declaring it makes it true?" she said softly. "How predictable." Kalen's grip tightened slightly around my hand. Not to restrain, to steady. "It is already true," he said. Her gaze flicked to me, assessing, hungry. "And when she destroys everything you've built?" she asked. "When that power inside her turns on you the way it turned on those creatures in the forest?" The thread pulsed. Sharp. Wrong. I felt it before it happened. The shift in the room. The subtle movement at the edges. The danger closing in. "They're here," I said. Kalen's attention snapped fully to me. "Where?" "Inside." The word barely left my mouth before it began. A scream tore through the far end of the ballroom. Then another. The crowd broke. Not outward, inward. Shadows moved where there should have been none. Bodies twisted. Forms flickered between wolf and something else. Hollow. They had come to the heart of the palace. For me. Kalen stepped in front of me instantly, his body a barrier between me and the chaos erupting around us. "Stay behind me." "No!" The word came without hesitation. Because this was not something he could fight alone. Because this was mine. The first of them lunged. Too fast. Too wrong. Kalen moved to meet it. I stepped past him. Light erupted from my hands, brighter than before. Stronger, not uncontrolled, not wild. Mine. It tore through the creature as it struck, dissolving it into nothing but a fleeting echo of relief. Another came. Then another. They surrounded us, drawn to me, hungry for something I could not see but could feel. "Alone, I know," I said. The thread surged, not pulling, anchoring. I reached for it. Not instinct, not accident, choice. It flared. Power surged through me, no longer tearing me apart, but moving with me, guided, focused. I stepped forward into the chaos. Light followed. One by one, the hollow ones fell. Not destroyed, released. The ballroom filled with silver radiance, turning night into something brighter than day. And at the center of it I stood. Not invisible, not hidden, seen, fully, finally. The last of them dissolved. Silence followed, real silence. Earned. My breath came fast, but steady. The light faded slowly, settling beneath my skin like something that had always belonged there. Kalen stepped up beside me. Close. Always close. His gaze moved over me, searching. "You stayed in control." Yes. The word felt different now. Stronger, certain. The council stared, no longer just afraid, understanding, or at least beginning to. Lady Hella's smile had vanished. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "You see?" I said quietly, my voice carrying in the stillness. "I am not what you tried to make me." Her gaze hardened. "You are exactly what I feared. Then you were afraid of the wrong thing." Silence settled again. But this time, it was not heavy. It was clear. I turned to Kalen. The thread between us hummed. Not demanding, not pulling. Steady, chosen. "I'm not standing here because you claimed me," I said. His gaze held mine. "I know. I'm here because I choose to be." The words landed with more weight than any declaration he had made. Because this was mine. His hand tightened around mine. Not claiming, answering. "I would burn this kingdom to the ground before I let anyone take that choice from you." I believed him. That was the most dangerous part. I exhaled slowly, then turned to face the court. "To anyone who thinks I don't belong here, I said, my voice steady, clear. You're right. A ripple of tension moved through the room. I wasn't born into this. I lifted my chin slightly. I chose it. Silence. Then Kalen stepped beside me, his presence a constant at my side. Not above, not in front, beside, as it should be. The first light of dawn began to spill through the tall windows, painting the marble in soft shades of gold and rose. The bond between us settled into something deeper, not a force, not a pull, a foundation. Behind us, the council still stood, still watching, still uncertain, but no longer in control. And for the first time in my life, I was not surviving. I was not hiding. I was not waiting for the next command. I stood in the light, in a place that had never been meant for someone like me, beside a man who had chosen me in front of the world, and I chose him back. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Because for the first time, I was exactly where I was meant to be. And I was done letting anyone decide otherwise.